Welcome back to the Sportsnaut interview. Today we are joined by Mike DiRocco, who covers the Jacksonville Jaguars for ESPN. And Mike, first of all, we appreciate you being with us, but we got to get the latest from you on Trevor Lawrence. Of course, the ankle injury against the Bengals on Monday night. As we approach the end of Tuesday, what's the latest with Lawrence and the injury?
Well, it's not as severe as they first originally thought, which is good news for the Jaguars. It is a right high ankle sprain. Doug Pederson said there's not a need for the surgery right now. You know, what do they call that? The tightrope surgery, I guess, that Kenny Pickett underwent, that Tua, had at Alabama. So he doesn't see that as being a need at this point right now. And I asked Doug Pederson, I said, hey, based on Trevor's history dealing with injuries that look a little bit more severe than maybe they ended up being, and being able to play the next week, I said, is there a legitimate chance that he could play this week? And Doug Pederson was like, look, I'm not going to put him in a box like that. I'm not, going to say yes or no. So, the fact that he wouldn't rule him out for this week was a little bit interesting to me. But, I think that a little bit of that might be, hey, let's keep the Browns guessing. But as of right now, right high ankle sprain, those things can take anywhere from 3 to 5 weeks. Which would be very bad if it's for the full 5. I don't expect him to play this week against the Browns, and then we'll see what happens going forward. But he's going to talk to the media on Wednesday, which I did not expect, his weekly Wednesday press conference. So maybe we'll get some fuller answers then.
Yeah, especially after seeing the way he reacted to the injury on the field, it made you feel like what you saw with Aaron Rodgers and, of course, Kirk Cousins, who immediately knew what happened. And then they pretty much knew they were done for the year. When you talk about the Jaguars missing Trevor Lawrence, I mean, obviously he's one of the best young quarterbacks in the NFL. We saw what C.J. Beathard did. Not bad. I mean, listen, this team could have actually won the game against the Bengals. There were some questionable calls. All sorts of things happened in that game. But when you look at the Jaguars, depending on that injury, what's the plan? What could be the plan for them if Lawrence has to miss multiple weeks going down here into this playoff run? Are they going to stick with C.J. Beathard, and how do they feel about that?
Yeah, at this point in the season, there's really nobody that you could bring in that's really going to give you any better chance to win than Beathard. I brought up Nick Foles as a guy to Doug Pederson as a guy that maybe they could bring in, as a practice squad guy, an emergency guy just in case, because their emergency quarterback is Christian Kirk, who has a core muscle injury and is probably done for the year. So that hurts him as well there. They'll roll with Beathard. 9 of 10 last night, 61 yards. He completed a deep pass that would have put him in position to maybe win the game. But it was overturned by a pretty suspect holding penalty on Anton Harrison there. So nothing really went well for them once Trevor Lawrence went down. So if he does have to play for an extended period of time, you're going to look at Travis Etienne and the running game, Dearness Johnson being sort of what they're going to lean on there. Evan Ingram, who's on pace for over 100 catches. He's already matched his career high of last year catch-wise, had his first touchdown the other day. He'll be a massive part of the offense going forward. So, it would be a little bit more conservative. Although, Beathard is a guy that Trent Baalke had in San Francisco, liked him, brought him over here to be the veteran guy behind, Trevor Lawrence. But, I mean, it's obviously, it's going to be a significant blow if he can't go for 3 or 4 weeks for sure.
Sure. And then, as you mentioned, the injury to Kirk there. The depth of this team has been pretty good, right? They've sustained injuries in the past and been able to kind of work through it. And one of the things that I was just struck by was how good the Jaguars have been over the last 21 games. When you look at their record going to back to last season, it's right up there with the 49ers and the Eagles. When you talk to Doug Pederson, you talk about this team and sort of how they've constructed it and how it's been moving. The Lawrence injury aside, how well do you think it's built now getting to this crunch time, and getting into the playoffs and getting past that first round and making some noise in the AFC?
Yeah, it's funny because we were talking about that the other day in the media room. The integrating Calvin Ridley into the offense hasn't gone as smoothly as I think anybody anticipated. this offense at the end of the year last year was what they finished top 10 in the league in scoring and total offense. I mean, it was really humming there. And it just really hasn't done that at a consistent level this year. And I think part of that is due to the offensive line issues. Part of it is due to, the trying to integrate Ridley in there. They've had some issues with guys running wrong routes. Ridley's been guilty of that. The play Trevor Lawrence got hurt on was a route that the rookie Parker Washington ran wrong, and that's why he ended up getting hurt. So the thing that they don't have are young guys ready to kind of step into that next role at the skill position guys. Travis Etienne for sure is that guy. He's going to be the bell cow for another year or so. But at receiver, they really don't have that young guy that they can kind of the draft and develop guys. So that in 2 years when Christian Kirk is, his contract's up and they decide we're going to move on, they have someone else to be, to kind of take over there. The same thing with Zay Jones. But offensively, as long as you have the head coach and the quarterback and Doug Pederson and Trevor Lawrence, look at Patrick Mahomes. And I'm not saying Trevor Lawrence is Patrick Mahomes, but they're at that point, I think, where you have the head coach, you have the quarterback who's an elite quarterback. You can get by with some other stuff. And I think that's where they're going to be in a year or two. But you just hope that Trevor's at the point where he can carry a team like Mahomes is. But the defense up until the Bengals game had been really, really good, forced a lot of turnovers, been one of the biggest surprises of the season for me. Josh Allen, Defensive Player of the Year candidate without question. So they had the pieces in place to make a little bitty run here, especially when you look at the AFC. But Baltimore's the number 1 seed. Well, excuse me, it's Miami now. But, Miami's not anything super special. The Ravens have their own issues. And obviously the Chiefs, the last 3 or 4 weeks have had some trouble scoring. So it's not like the NFC with San Francisco, Dallas, maybe, and Philadelphia, where it's clearly those three. I mean, it seems like you could pick a team out of the hat in the AFC. So if they get healthy and they've got those guys back, Trevor, the left tackle Walker Little, and things kind of get back again, rolling offensively, which they were starting to hit their stride the last couple of weeks, then you just never know. It's matchups, and it's a team that gets hot, and, you get in the playoffs, and like, Bill Parcells says, just get in the tournament, and then anything can happen.
Absolutely. And you look at, to your point about the AFC race right now, you could legitimately go to the 11th seed right now, which is Buffalo. And yes, they've had their struggles, but it goes to show you it's sort of a bloodbath. You don't know how it's going to work out. And so clearly the Jaguars, if Trevor Lawrence, especially if he can get healthy pretty quickly, seem to be in a nice position there. You talked about the defense a little bit. Josh Allen, of course. What's been the difference for them this year? Because they have been one of the surprises in the league. Very impressive with what they've done. Yes, of course, we had the Browning game for the Bengals, but that happens all the time. Defenses, sometimes matchups just don't work out. But when you look at that defense, what's been the key?
Well, they haven't gotten good pressure overall, but Josh Allen has, and he's been phenomenal. Big time. I mean, he's a 1 sack away from tying Calais Campbell's single-season franchise record. He's got an outside shot at being, 18, 19 sacks. So he's been phenomenal. When the defense has been good, they've forced turnovers, a lot of turnovers, and they've sort of lived on that. They got one last night, Josh Allen with an interception. They ended up with a touchdown there. So the communication has been so much better until last night. Last night was a mess, which is inexcusable. But, Devin Lloyd last year, the rookie linebacker, was lost out there on the field. And it took Foye Oluokun, it took a lot out of him to get him lined up, in addition to taking care of his own responsibilities. Last night we saw a lot of that, too, in the back end of the secondary because, Monteric Brown was inactive, and they had to bring in Greg Jr. to be the nickel once Trey Herndon went down. So if you notice on the long touchdown pass to Jamar Chase, for example, Andre Cisco is trying to get Greg Jr. lined up, and he's out of position and a step too slow and can't help out on the deep pass down the sideline. So that was a big issue last night. And look, the Bengals were the worst rushing team in the league, and they manhandled the Jags up front last night. That was the biggest surprise to me. I mean, they ran for like 150. They've only been running for like 77 yards a game. To me, that was the biggest surprise. But overall, the Jags have been really good against the run this year. I think they were 3rd in the league, 4th in the league coming in. So you just got to wonder, was last night the anomaly? You can't be at a high level every week, not with 17 games over 18 weeks. It's just, they didn't play really well against the Niners a couple of weeks ago, but then in the next 2 games they played really well. Then last night, what a mess, gave up almost 500 yards of offense. Should be a little bit easier for them this week in Cleveland. I mean, that's not exactly an offense that should be able to score a ton of points, even if it is Joe Flacco.
Right.
So, the defense has been probably the biggest surprise. And Mike Caldwell, until last night, had done a really, really good job of getting them ready to play and kind of opening things up and giving especially the guys up front, some more freedom in terms of stunts and twists and games that they're playing there. So, that was just if they had won that game last night, Trevor Lawrence doesn't get hurt, we'd be just killing the defense today and this week for just playing so poorly. But we all forget about it because half the Jags' offensive roster got hurt last night.
Yeah, clearly that changes everything. And then the division. I mean, you have the Texans, you have the Colts, these teams that no one expected to pressure. That puts pressure on them too, right? Because these games, the games with the Texans obviously were good ones. One of them went the other way, but they're able. They're less able to go through. You look at what's happening with the Dolphins in that division, pretty poor, right? So just like the Patriots had all those years with the bad AFC East, the Dolphins are benefiting from that too. Lastly, before we let you go, we appreciate the time today, Mike. Doug Pederson, what he's done in Jacksonville, just talk about the difference from when he walked in the building to now and how, yes, he followed the Urban Meyer disaster. It would seem somewhat easy to come in after him, but at the same time, all Doug Pederson's ever done is win, develop quarterbacks, and get buy-in. What have you seen in your time in covering him?
Well, to me, the biggest thing is you can't praise Doug Pederson and talk about all the good things he's done without acknowledging just how much of a cesspool it was when Urban Meyer was there. It was awful. Every area of the building was miserable. Marketing, tickets, football. You had this section of the building not talking to this section. These guys were not happy. Those guys were not. It really was a mess. And the one thing that the players talked to us about Urban Meyer too is that he was always like this, up and down, up and down, up and down. He'd be screaming for no reason at you at one moment and then trying to be your buddy the next. So they never knew what they were going to get from him. And what the players all told me last year, they love Doug Pederson because Doug Pederson's just even keel all the way through. They know what they're going to get out of him every single day, attitude-wise, emotionally, they know what to expect with him. And that's a huge thing for those guys. The comfort level and routine that these guys thrive in is what Doug Pederson is really good at in handling. And, the funny thing to me is he's basically ripped into them. They were 3-7 at one point last year, and he never ripped into them. Then they lose at home to the Texans in week 3, I think it was, and just got embarrassed at home in a game that they, at the time, we didn't realize the Texans were going to be as good as they were. But, at the time, you're thinking, okay, the Jags are supposed to be one of the best teams in the AFC. They should win this division in a walkover, and they just get beaten up at home. So he lit into them at halftime of that game. And that really got their attention and kind of shook them up a little bit. But then to balance that, Doug Pederson comes in, the next day, the Monday, and is, like, hey, guys, look, it was bad. I yelled at you, but let's just remember, we got to go out and have fun. This is week 3. The world's not ending. And I think they really respect that. When guys like and respect their coach, they're going to respond to him. And that's exactly what we've seen.
Yeah, it's all about establishing that culture. And when you have the evenness, you saw it even last night during the game at different moments of the game, good and bad. There he was, like you said, just even. Of course, the concern on his face with Trevor Lawrence, you could definitely get that tinge. But outside of that, you definitely got it. Mike DiRocco from ESPN covers the Jaguars. Make sure you follow his work up on ESPN.com. Mike, thanks again, and we'll hopefully catch up with you during the playoffs.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.